Okay, today we are going to talk about the law of sines, the law of cosines, and finding the area of a triangle if you're not given the base and the height. You can actually use trig. So when do we use laws of sines and cosines? We're trying to find parts of a triangle when we don't have a right triangle. If you have a right triangle, you're going to use SOHCAHTOA. But you can't use SOHCAHTOA on an oblique triangle, which is a non-right triangle. So everybody should have done law of sines and cosines in geometry, but I don't really do it in pre-calc, so it can be on the ACT, so I am going to at least touch upon it quickly. So we have an oblique triangle. Angles, six parts, three angles, three sides. Our angles are capital A, B, C. Our sides, side A is across from angle A. Side B is across from angle B. Side C is across from angle C. So these formulas are in the attached notes. So if this is too quick, law of sines is a proportion. Sine of an angle over its side, this ratio of the sines of all the angles over their sides have to be equal. The law of cosines sort of looks like the Pythagorean theorem, but it obviously has different parts. So this is if you're finding side A or angle A. What you should notice is that the side that's on that side of the equal sign goes with that angle. Now this could be b squared. That's capital B. This is c squared. That's capital C. These other two sides are just interchanged in any order in there. So what I always say when I'm giving a triangle, try to use law of sines first. When does law of sines work? When one of those fractions is filled in, the top and the bottom. So really, what does that mean? You have a side across from an angle. So if you have this side and that angle, you can use law of sines. If you have that angle and that side, law of sines. Angle B, side B, law of sines. When is law of cosines going to need to be used? When this can't be filled in where one of them is filled in. So what some people just sort of memorize, law of cosines is when you have like these two sides in that angle. You don't have that side, you don't have that angle, you don't have that angle. You would have to use law of cosines. The other would be if you have side, side, side. If you have all three sides, you don't have an angle across from a side. Thing you want to remember, never use Pythagorean theorem. You don't have a right triangle. You're going to have to use law of sines and cosines. Now, law of sines, if that works, you use it twice, and then you'll be able to find the other part because the sum of the angles is 180. With law of cosines, you use law of cosines once, then you use law of sines, then you'll be able to get the other angle. So law of sines twice, law of cosines, law of sines, that's really the work that you'll be using. So what I'm going to do is, with the questions that you're given, you're either going to be asked for a specific part or you're going to be asked to solve the triangle. I need a calculator though. So if I ask you to solve the triangle, okay, so I have this angle A, angle B, angle C, and I put this is 27, this is 28 degrees, and this is 102 degrees. So solve the triangle would mean get all the parts. Well, if I look at that, I'm missing angle A, side C. I have side B. So that's what I have to find. Now, which one am I going to use? I look at my picture. Now, the first thing you want to always remember, if you have two angles, you can always find the third. So you would add those two up, 130, subtract from 180, angle A would have to be 50. So now, what am I going to use? Law of sines or law of cosines? Do I have a side across from an angle? I do. So I'm going to set up sine of B over B, and then the order doesn't matter. Sine of A, which would be 50 over side A, sine of C over side C. Now, you can only solve one proportion at a time. These are proportions. So you look at that. What are you going to put in your calculator? You're cross multiplying. A times the sine of 28 degrees equals the sine of 50 degrees times 27. How are you going to get A on a side by itself? Divide that, and that would give you A. Now, I did give you guys a link to that calculator. So you on Desmos, if you don't have a calculator, you're going to put that in your calculator. That would give you A. Same thing with C. If I look at C, I'm going to do the sine of 28 times C equals 27 times the sine of 102. So really what gets put in my calculator is 27 times the sine of 102 divided by the sine of 28. So that's a problem with law of sines. I didn't bring my calculator, so that's a slight error. So if I gave you this, A equals 22, B equals 12, angle A equals 42. I would say to you, if you're someone that needs to see it, draw it. Doesn't matter where you put A, B, C. So A is 42, side B, which would be across from angle B, side A is 22. So now, if you look at that, hey, go get my calculator that's upstairs. It might be by somewhere by the table or by Dad's computer. So if you look at this, what you want to notice, you have a side across from an angle. Law of sines is going to work. Now, you can't find those two angles. It's not like they're subtract and divide by 2. You don't know what they are. So you set it up. Sine of A over A equals sine of B, you don't have it, over 12 equals sine of C over C. Now, you can't mess with that at all yet. So you're going to have to deal with this. So cross multiply. The sine of B times 22 equals the sine of 42 times 12. Divide by 22. So this is sine of B equals that. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that in my calculator. So I got the sine of 42 degrees times 12 divided by 22, and that gives me the sine of B equals 0.36498. Now, in order for you to find what B is, you should have done that in like geometry class. That's inverse. So what you're going to do is you're going to press second sine of 0.36498. And if I do second sine of that answer, That gives me 21.4 degrees. So now that's 21.4. I have that now. Now what can I do? Find angle C. So I take 42 plus 21.4. I get 63.4. I take 180 minus 63.4. And now I have 116.6. So now that's 116.6. Now you're going to find side C. Doesn't matter if you use this or this, but like me, I'd probably use those parts. So then if you think of cross multiplying, you're going to have the sine of 42 times C equals 22 times the sine of 116.6, divide by the sine of 42, and that will give you C. So solve the triangle, find everything. So let's look at another one where I give you this triangle, ABC, and I tell you that that's 14, that's 19, even my picture obviously doesn't go, and that's 8. So if I'm looking at that, I got side, side, side. I don't have a side across from an angle. So I have to use law of cosines. Now, with law of cosines, you don't just find, you have to be careful. You want to find the largest angle first. The largest angle is across from the longest side. So you guys look at the formula and you see like that. Well, I'm using 19 because I'm finding angle B. So if this is going to be the cos of capital B, this has to be little b squared, which is 19 squared. Now these two, it doesn't matter the order that you put them in. Just be careful in doing that. Now this is the one people sort of mess up because they try to put that all together. How you're going to do this if you're writing your work, you're doing 19 squared, 361. 14 squared plus 8 squared is 260. 2 times 14 times 8 is 224 times the cos of B. You cannot do 260 minus 224. That's connected. So you're going to subtract 260. You're going to get 101 equals negative 224 cos of B. You're going to divide by negative 224. So 101 divided by negative 224 gives me negative 0.45 is the cos of B. For me to find B, I do second cos, inverse cos of that answer, which is 116.8 degrees. Now, the thing that I want you to see is once that's put in there, now you have a side across from an angle. You don't have to do that. Use law of sines. So you're going to have the sine of 116.8 over 19. And then you should go and find the smallest angle. So you find the largest, then the smallest. So we're going to go sine of C over 8. Do law of sines, which again, you're going to end up putting in sine of 116.8 times 8 divided by 19. But then that's going to be the sine equals 0.375. So how you're going to get C then is second sine, which would give you 22.1 degrees. So now once that's 22.1 degrees, You find your other angle by adding those two up and subtracting from 180. So one more, because you do need to see the other law of cosines. So I tell you A is 34, B is, angle B is 92 degrees, and side C is 28. So if you're someone that needs to see it, you're like, okay, A, B, C is 28, side C. B is 92 degrees, side A is 34. You don't have a side across from an angle, so you're going to have to use law of cosines. So again, if you think, if this is what you're looking at, A, B, C, cos A. If that's what you're looking at, there is only one capital letter in that. That has to be filled in if you're using those three parts. That means that has to be the cos of 92 degrees. But that was capital B. So that means that is B squared. You put those in any order. 28 squared plus 34 squared minus 2 times 28 times 34 times the cos of 92. Now, this is the easy one, sort of calculating. That all goes in. So I'm going to put in my calculator, 28 squared plus 34 squared minus 2 times 28 times 34 times the cosine of 92 degrees. And I get B squared equals 2006.45. Well, that's B squared. To get B, you square root that answer, and that is 44.8. So now that's 44.8. What are you going to use after you find that? Law of sines. Law of sines, you're going to have the sine of 92 over 44.8. Pick the smaller side. So the smaller side is going to be sine of C over 28. Solve for angle C. Add those two up, subtract from 180. All right, so area of a triangle. Last thing. This you would not have done in geometry, but it is something that if you remember it, it is quick to find the area of a triangle if you're given that. So when you're given that, and I'm asking you for area, well, we know the area of a triangle is 1/2 base times height. Well, there's my base. That's not my height. My height is that. Well, you actually, I would prove this, and I do end up proving this in like a pre-calc class, but if you have that angle, that triangle, that's a right triangle, and you know that's 8 and you know that's 42 degrees, you can do sine to solve for that height. So if you're given really side angle side, which means you have two sides and an angle between, to find the area, you do 1/2 the side times the side times the sine of the angle. So really what that means is if I solve that problem without any of this stuff, how do I find the area of that triangle? I do 1/2 times 12 times 8 times the sine of 42 degrees. So if I do 1/2 times 12 times 8 times the sine of 42 degrees, the area of that would be 32.12 square units, feet, inches, whatever it would be. So that is a quick little lesson. And we'll just see the reason I'm doing this now. There's a lot of new trig. So I wanted to sort of do the trig that you know first, and then we move to the new stuff. So, and I don't know that you remember law of sines or law of cosines, but it is good to know how to use that with non-right triangles. So that's the lesson for today.